And yes, I'm going to be interviewing global and local leaders to help share stories of transparency, development, and all things leadership, but I need to go first. To be very plain, I needed to take some time out of ministry to address personal traumas and, to be very frank, some moral fails in my life that was affecting my ability to lead from a healthy place. There was, areas of sexual sin, there was burnout that compromised some of my decision making, and it broke trust. It was never my intention because my inner circle was aware, but as a leader, no matter whether anybody else has done anything to you, you carry responsibility. And the reality of it is that the situation, no matter what anyone else has done, it was my fault. A situation did happen, and ultimately it was my fault. I didn't handle it in the way that I now know I should have handled it. And that caused a number of people, including myself, to be injured. And it was necessary, without going into some of the specific details, it was necessary for me to make some decisions. And after getting advice and praying, I decided to resign. As soon as certain things, were brought to light, my heart is just to apologize, and that stands. For those who will listen to this, people are on different parts of their journey. I wrote letters. I had difficult but necessary conversations, and my heart really is I don't want anybody to miss God due to certain choices that I made. From the time that I took that sabbatical, I made a decision to resign and transition. And my heart is just blessing and well wishes for them moving forward. Again, I've been open with my inner circle about the relationships I've had over the years, and what I've learned is that facts without context is actually very dangerous. So there were certain things that was said that, I'd been sleeping with 12 women, I'd got someone pregnant, I'd abused somebody, and none of those things are true. The reality of it is that I've committed no crime. I have never slept with any, not 12 women in or out of any community, and I've never been abusive. But what is true is that I have at times had, in some relationships, consensual intimacy, and that doesn't, just because it's consensual doesn't mean it's right. The reality of it is that in moments of brokenness, I did make decisions at times that were less than the standard of God, and that's the reality, and that is true. My spiritual leaders advised me to, rather than healing to just function, heal holistically so that you can actually be a whole person. At the beginning, it was difficult. It was so painful because, number one, I was thinking, what are people going to think? Number two, I was thinking, I'm not used to prioritizing myself. I've been used to rescuing others. So this was difficult initially. But as time went on, I saw the benefit, and I could see, actually, this is something that I believe should be a standard, that people should actually focus on their own well-being, emotionally, spiritually, holistically, and that should be a foundation and a prerequisite for them to actually engage in ministry. I've been spending time with family, I've been in counseling, therapy, literally, 2 therapists for the past year, each week. I've been serving, my spiritual leaders, I've been spending time with my brothers, just seeking to live as a godly man without anything to distract me from my own personal restoration. Ministry is good, it's powerful, people are being touched, but sometimes being the rescuer that I was, I'm no longer that now, but being the rescuer that I was, I realized that ministry was distracting me from the actual attention that I needed to give to my soul. I was helping others, and at the same time, I didn't really acknowledge that I needed actually God to rescue me in some areas of my life. I'm not saying this to justify anything or even to solicit sympathy, but it's important to share certain things, to give more context, which I believe as a leader is necessary to help inspire others, to help also demonstrate that actually if God can do that in this person, no matter how broken he was or she was, then God can do it with them. The reality of it is that this was not due to one situation. This was something that actually I've been desiring to take some time out from before. but my internal framework wouldn't allow me to. My mindset was, I've got responsibilities. The business is running. The people need counseling. The family, extended family things, different things. And so that was within my present context. But over the years, there were so many things that have contributed to me needing to actually take this time. So one of the things that definitely was a contributing factor to some of the challenges that I had as a leader was being molested as a child. That was something that, to be very honest, it didn't trouble me, because I've realized that when you haven't had something, you don't know it's not there. If you haven't had an arm, you're not going to know it's not there. So when I, went through the therapy, I begin to learn. I was speaking to my therapist, and he was saying to me that, the way that you've painted your childhood is that everything was perfect. And I said, it's not that it was perfect, it's just that I feel uncomfortable to speak about certain things, because I do not want it to present as if to dishonor my family. I'm coming from an African background. The culture is, don't hang your dirty things outside. And so I've got a great mother, great sibling, great brothers. And, when my dad was alive, though there was challenges and I desired more connection, I'm grateful for the life that I had. So I had to address the fact that actually some of these things that I'm not addressing is because there's an internal system on the inside of me that says, actually, do not minimize this, it's not that bad. And that carried on. And so that I was about 9 years old when that happened. And as far as I was concerned, it wasn't that deep. But as I was growing up, I started to notice, why do I feel guilty in establishing my boundaries? Why do I feel bad? Why do I feel that actually, even if the thing that the person is requiring goes against my values, I will still sometimes comply? And I'm not saying to blame the person, I'm just saying to say that there was something that was underdeveloped from that point. And so I've learned now about what I would call the the developmental foundations of pastoral vulnerability. And that simply means that although pastors are anointed, they are strong, they are the leaders, there's a contradiction because they're also vulnerable. And the vulnerability is that we're still unfinished. And if we don't address some of the childhood developmental issues, they will meet us in ministry. And ministry is not for the faint-hearted. What happens is that the pressures of life, pressures of ministry, they mix with those developmental areas that have not been addressed. And then you can end up playing roles in your childhood that you play in your business, in your ministry. And that's what I started to notice. So from that, another key event was my dad passing away. And by the way, when I'm saying this, I want it to be very clear. I am not saying this to justify sin. There is no justification for sin. In actual fact, wherever there is an excuse for sin, there's an open door. And that has been one of the biggest breakthroughs, in this journey for me. So this is more about context than justification in any shape, way, or form. Dad passing was significant for me as well, because when he passed, I took about 2.5 months out of ministry. I was thinking, I need to heal so I can get back. I need to heal so I can get back. So my mindset was still a guilt-driven restoration. It was a restoration that was not focused on myself. It was focused on other people. Now, again, probably about a week or about 5 days after Dad passed, we received a phone call. And that phone call was one of the most devastating things. And it's only something that actually I only realized from the therapy that I was having, that you can have delayed trauma. It comes after. And so after Dad being, told that Dad passed, COVID time, so you don't even have the chance to go, into the hospital. So I'm processing this, and then I'm thinking, can you imagine? I'm thinking, this is gonna be a message for Sunday. Can you imagine? I'm thinking this is a message for Sunday. So I was confusing sacrifice or self-abandonment for sacrifice. And so when he passed, a few days after that, I got a call. And this call, I'll just say how it is. We was told that my cousin had been murdered. Can you imagine? They literally had lured him to a place, and I'll just say that. And so I had no grid of that kind of pain. So I didn't realize it at the time. I just suppressed it. I just left it there. And I just processed to the degree that I could at the time, Dad's passing, got back into ministry. And I planned to have time off. In actual fact, I was putting Mondays. Every Monday I would have off, but it wasn't consistent because my internal framework was sacrifice for the kingdom. The next year, I got into a personal relationship. Again, this is not about blaming anybody, but it ended. And that triggered, again, another kind of a sense of loss, of grief. And because I'm blessed, because I have great people around me, my thought process is this in context to the things that are happening around me? This is not a big thing. And so I did what I did. I would serve, I would rescue others, I would do those things. And I'm not trying to put myself as a hero, but that was the mindset that I had. That relationship had ended after about a year. A few months after that, my friend who I've known for, I don't know how long now, close friend who was a part of the church community, he died. I got a call from his wife and he passed away. We was at the hospital. And I'm saying this not because there are other people who have more reason to grieve than me. Believe me, there are other people. So this is not even a matter of blaming that. I had the privilege and the honor of being able to participate in the organizing of the funeral and all those amazing things. But in my mind, I knew something was breaking. It felt like, and it felt like one thing after the other. And I wanted to be there for people around me. I said, I'm not going to leave them. And although this sounds noble, the reality is that I was so broken. I was so broken, but it was like I felt too guilty to stop. Feeling guilty felt like a moral failure. And so when you don't give attention to certain parts of your soul, you start to malfunction. And so during some of these moments, that's when certain things that I've been delivered from, certain things that I had left, I found, and there's grace for healing. God is a healer, he can restore. But before, in that time, one of the things that I noticed that was one of my coping strategies is that sometimes I wouldn't feel comfortable enough in discomfort. And so I would still pray, but there was an area of discomfort that is too painful. And so I would distract myself, put on a movie, and I would then entertain certain conversations I had no business entertaining. It wasn't because the people were bad. It wasn't even per se because my desires were, my intentions were malicious, but I was emotionally drained. And what I found is that I ended up abandoning myself in the name of ministry. And so the church started to stabilize, and and this is the thing, ministry doesn't pause for your pain. That's the biggest lesson for me. Ministry doesn't pause for your pain. And this is something and that's why I'm sharing these things, that hopefully other leaders, people, not just church leaders, people would have this mindset that actually sometimes what we can do is that we can try and sacrifice things that God never told us to sacrifice. God never told me to sacrifice myself, but I thought that was noble at the time. And so as things started to stabilize, the cracks started to show in me, in my certain ways I was thinking, and certain decisions I was making, until it led up to the climax, to actually what then caused me to say, what, I need to take some time. And my spiritual leaders, this was not a punishment. It was actually, Emmanuel, you are leading and serving. You're anointed. There's a heart for ministry, a heart for God, but there's some parts of your life that need attention. And it was counterintuitive because in my mind, I had such guilt. Not just guilt for my choices, but the guilt of putting myself first was unusual. But it transformed my life. It really did. My heart really is I don't want anybody to miss God due to certain choices that I made. Even though they were sincere at the time, I was doing what I knew. I wouldn't want anybody to be impacted or think that God can't restore. I believe that God can. And I respect the right for some to disconnect. I believe that some will recognize that I'm a human being and I'm sincere and I'm flawed, but I'm pursuing Jesus, and they'll have empathy. Others may not, and I respect either choice. The first 2 months was the most broken. I mean, I couldn't really sleep. I've never experienced this kind of experience before, so it was mentally, emotionally so difficult. Prayer was heavy. There were times where I couldn't even articulate, but my mind was, God, you just need to meet me in this place, So it was tough. It was so tough. As the months went on, I started to, I did experience the Holy Spirit, which actually was a part of the beginning of a journey of transformation, a journey of healing. I've experienced God before, but in this moment, it's different when you've not been able to pursue God from a place of, it's different when you're in a position where I knew how broken I was. So in that place, for me to experience God's presence and Him reaffirming who I am and my call and all these things was a completely different experience. And so from there, that was when God began to show me how I actually, the purpose of this. I encountered Jesus. This is the essence of why I'm actually speaking. I encountered Jesus. I actually believe that there are many people who are going through things that are similar to myself. And so before I can talk about the way forward, I have to highlight what happened in the process, because this is not just a conversation that is an apology. This is also a message of hope to leaders, seasoned or emerging, to say, listen, if you humble yourself and go through the necessary process, God will meet with you. And so in this process, I have undeniably met with Jesus Christ, not just in terms of spiritual encounter, but through life-changing principles. And through that, God has given me a word. And from that word, God had inspired me to write a book. And so the next phase for Apostle Emmanuel is there's a message that God has given me for anyone who's willing to receive it. The things that I'm talking about now, as much as it is uncomfortable, that's not my reality now. My reality is wholeness. My reality is I've experienced the transforming power of the Holy Spirit. My reality now is that I've learned the power of sharing scars in a way that is deeper. I thought that I was vulnerable before, but absolutely nowhere near to this now. So the way forward now is there is some seriously impactful things that God has given me that are going to benefit the body of Christ and the world as a whole. And so whilst I acknowledge accountability for some of the choices, I want to be clear that because of the divine affirmation that I've received, my focus is not to chase approval or seek permission. What I'm doing now is, by the grace of God, I want to fulfill the prophecies that He's given me to fulfill. And what does that look like? There are some things, like I said, that are going to come out that will be aimed to empower and ensure that other people, leaders, pastors, businessmen, mothers, fathers, will not have to go through anything that I've gone through. I believe that the next phase of this calling and assignment for my life is to turn that pain, turn those mistakes, turn those things into something that's packaged for the rest of the body of Christ, whoever's willing to receive it, so that they can walk in wholeness, transformation, and carry God's presence. For the leaders that are listening to me, I have a seriousness about this. You see, when people get hurt as a leader, we cannot blame the devil. We cannot say Satan did this. Though the devil is involved in certain choices, I'm not here to shift blame. There were choices that I made that I shouldn't have made. And that's just the reality. There's something powerful and transformative when we can, as a leader, just say, listen, no, I don't care who was saying this, I don't care about the rumors, I don't care about all those things. There's something powerful about you just saying, actually, I'm accountable. This was my fault. Forget about what anyone else said. This was my fault. So for those who are listening as leaders, you may be navigating some difficult things, and I do not want you to be preoccupied with what somebody else has done to you. Focus on your soul, because as a leader there is a beauty and a burden. There's a preciousness about having the influence, but there's also an accountability to what you've done. And so I'll challenge leaders, take accountability for your process. It doesn't mean that everything that you've done is wrong. I'm not saying you might not have been treated bad. I'm not saying you might have experienced frustration, betrayal, all these things. But for me, it was at the point whereby I acknowledged, actually, no, this is me. And can I tell you something? When God showed me some of the uglier parts, he didn't condemn me. What he did was he brought transformation. And so leaders, number one, take accountability for your areas of development, your failures, and your achievement. Number two is do not postpone your inner healing. I was literally, we're 2025 now. I was saying from maybe 2022, 23, I want to take some time off. I'll take maybe 1 week off. Then something would go on. I'll postpone until it culminated in certain choices that I made that caused unnecessary damage, unnecessary injuries. In fact, the reality is it didn't need to be as it was. It was because I did not prioritize my own healing. So if you're a leader, listen to me. I don't care how busy you are. Prioritize, because the Bible says when it's well with the righteous, the whole city will rejoice. So prioritize your healing. And the last thing I would say is this is a calling that is so sacred. This is something that you can bring people into if you prioritize your accountability, prioritize your family, take people with you. That's what I would say to leaders. I would go back and sit with the 9-year-old Emmanuel that was molested. I would tell him, listen, it's not your fault. I would encourage him. I would teach him the things that I know now, self-compassion, helping him to understand the difference between what it means to empathize and show compassion. I would then go to Emmanuel, I'll fast forward and I'll tell Emmanuel, listen, I'll fast forward to about 15, 16 years and I'll say, listen, just focus on knowing Jesus. I'm not saying that ministry has not been a blessing. I'm not saying I've not empowered people. I got into ministry at 18 years old. I'm 36. All of my adult life has been ministry. I'll tell Emmanuel at 18 years old, focus on your walk with God, healing and wholeness. Don't rush. That's what I'll tell him.